Greetings, technology enthusiasts. I am Chandrahas and I am delighted to be here with you representing CyberBrainer. Do you not believe that the technology sector is advancing at an unprecedented rate, making this an opportune moment to acquire the skills that will facilitate your progress? With CyberBrainer, we are empowering you to take control of your own future. At CyberBrainer, we do not merely impart your interests. We assert that information is power, yet it is the application of knowledge that distinguishes you. Our courses are meant to equip you with essential skills, whether you are pursuing data science, understanding artificial intelligence, or delving into cybersecurity. Let us commence the session and seize the future today. Thank you.
Not sure if we even have some templates. We build something called review templates, and these review templates have different sections. These performance reviews are different sections. Basically, all we are trials. Taking any other business objects is exactly the same. What is any other questions? As I mentioned in advanced report, we still have to talk about that sort of and I think a few other miscellaneous options. But let's start with the matrix report. Now, what is the purpose of an advanced report? It gets you the data dump right. It gets you that rows and columns of detailed data. Now that is pretty handy, but many times that is not what you need. You don't need the data dump. You only need summarization. For example, let's say executives. You are presenting a list of your hires and terminates in your system. Now your executive, let's say VP HR, is not interested in getting the details of ABC employee was hired on this day and the first terminator on this day, right? They are only interested in high-level numbers. They want to understand the attrition rate and they want to know in January 100 people were hired and 50 were terminated. In February 50 were hired and 100 were terminated and XYZ is my attrition rate. They're only interested in those high-level numbers. They are not interested in details as to see who those 100 people were terminated, right? Probably. What is the management level of people getting terminated? Then where 50% were executives, 20% were senior managers, 10% was associates, and on and forth. They are only interested in those summarized numbers, and the matrix report allows you to get that data, right? It is the basis of your advanced analytics in Workday. Created again in exactly the same manner, I am creating a custom report. Right. The report type is matrix. And what I'll do is, try building a report on a different data source. Check if I have used any other data source. My decent reporting. Business process initiation trend. What I want to do build is, let's take custom report. Advanced. I want to know the list of standard reports and custom reports in the system based on their different report type. I simply want to know how many custom reports are there in the system of type matrix. How many standard reports are there in the system of type matrix. Advanced and on and forth. I have a data source called custom report on writing all custom reports. This is the data source I'm using, right? And if you see, this is the data source on which all custom reports, that report that we discussed, which basically shows you all the custom reports in the system, is also built. And I'm calling it custom reports. Now a matrix report, the layout is very different. This is all that was common. You build any type of report, you'll have to select the data source and it gets you the prime business object related to the data source. Apart from that, if you see, I have a question. Go ahead. I have selected. Go ahead. Actually, I was creating a report of a compensation data source from compensation analysis, or say, any other business object related to compensation, but in the field section. I was not able to get all the fields which are of that from that data source. When I open that data source separately, those all the business objects was showing. Is this optimized for performance? Could be. That is the case. It will only get you those indexed fields. It will not get you non-indexed fields. Even if I can check that data. But inside, when you go in those fields which I was able to see in the data source report, they are not available in that field section. Zek, can you give me the name of the data source? I think it's compensation. I forgot actually. I noted it down, but I don't have that. Usually this is what happens. If you have selected optimized for performance checkbox, then it will not allow you to select any non-optimized field on that report or non-indexed field on that report. Right. All you have to do is you'll have to go back to the report on the advanced tab. You have this option optimized for performance and uncheck it. Then you'll be able to select it. That is the only reason. I had selected advanced report by mistake. Again creating a new report by tricks and I'm calling it custom report. Now if you see this, the layout of this report is different from how an advanced report looks. We have something called row grouping. If we scroll down, we have something called column grouping. And then we have something called defined fields. To summarize, this layout is different from an advanced report. Now what is my requirement? I want to get a sense of how many reports are there in my system or of different type. How many matrix reports are there? How many composite reports are there? And on and forth. Well, I'm searching for field report type because that's what gives me all the different reports of different type. If I go into this field, it says it returns either simple advanced matrix for each report. It simply shows me the type of that report. Now this is all I'm doing. I don't have to do anything else. I've only gone to my matrix report on the first tab, which is matrix under row grouping. I'm selecting the group by field as a report type. Let me press and run this. When I run this report, if you see under report type, it gives me all the different types of report. Advanced matrix, simple, search on and forth. And then it is also giving me another column which is called count. And then it's giving me a count against that type. Now, if I click here, for example, on any one of these numbers, let me take the smaller number. If you see, this is actually a hyperlink. And when I click here, it gives me that count at the top. And then it gives me that report which is part of that count. Right? The question is, where is this count coming from? Because when I created my custom report, I simply selected if I may open it in a separate tab. I simply selected a report type as the row grouping. What is a row grouping? The first thing, it is basically the field based on which I want to group my data. There are a number of custom reports in the system which would be returned by that data source. And I want to group my data based on the type of that report, and that grouping I want to define at the level. If you see, each of my custom reports is grouped based on the type of that report. And because this is a row grouping that I have defined, these are all the rows at which the grouping displays. Right. How do I want to group the data that has been returned by my data source? That's what the row grouping defines. Similarly, I can also do column grouping. However, the column grouping is optional. Now the next thing, how is that I'm getting this count? If I scroll down, if you see, Workday by default adds a summarization field. Right? For each of this or for the data that is returned by this data source. How do you want to summarize the data? I want to summarize the data or group. The data or group those reports based on their type. Right? And in terms of summarization, I want to count the reports against each report type. The default summarization type is count, which Workday always adds. Now, if you see, Workday has added count as the summarization type, but then it doesn't specify what needs to be counted. Right. This summarization type, it simply counts the instances that are returned by your data source. Right. Instead of this, if I take, for example, workers data source and I use this summarization type, it will simply count the number of workers. This summarization type, it counts whatever values or instances that your data source returns. And then they are grouped against the grouping field that you have defined. That's how I'm getting this output. The count is simply counting the reports that the data source returns, and then they are grouped against the row grouping that has been defined. Right. If you see, it is still getting me the same data had I built an advanced report, but then it is now getting me a summarized value. Right. Now I can do all sorts of things with this matrix report. For example, in addition to row grouping, I can also do a column grouping. Let me edit this report once again. I can come in here and I can also do a column grouping. Let's see what other values are available. And there's a field called times executed. Number of times executed. Right. On the row value, I'm grouping based on the type of the report. And then on the column, I want to group these reports based on the number of times they have executed. Now this may not be really relevant because some reports could have been executed 0 times. Some reports would have been executed 10,000 times and on and forth. This field is a Workday delivered field. It simply counts the number of times the report was executed within a specific date range. Now, if you remember, I said some data sources come with inbuilt prompts and some fields also come with inbuilt prompts. Now, this is that example of a field that comes with an inbuilt prompt. The moment you add this field, it will automatically add some parameters to that report. Right. Some Workday delivered fields. They come with those default prompts or parameters, and this is one of those fields. The idea is here. You specify the start date and end date within which you want to count the number of times the report was executed. This may not give the perfect output in the sense there could be a huge variation in the data. But let's see. If you see, this is directly coming from that field that we have added. End date I'm selecting as today's date and start date, let's say, is January 1st, 2022. Alright. If you remember, the overall count of our transposed report was 15. Right. For each report type, the count is still giving me the overall count of those reports. Right? Transposed report are 15. The overall number of advanced report is 2371. And the total custom reports is 3737. Right? On the row grouping, we have still grouped our reports based on the report type. But then on the column grouping, we have also grouped our reports based on the number of times those reports have been executed. On the column end. On the column grouping we have grouped those reports based on the number of times they were executed. Now this overall count of 15, if I take this as an example for transposed report, it is 15 for transposed. But then on the column end, they are again grouped. Out of these 15 reports, 12 have been executed 0 times in the last 6 months. One report has been executed 6 times in the last 3 or 4 months, whatever we have specified. And then there's another category called 1. Right? Based on the grouping I have defined, if you see, I don't have to build any logic. It is simply getting my data based on the row grouping and the column grouping that I had specified. Once again, we can get the values of number of reports which are run and not run based on the rows and columns. Can we get the view of which are all these? For example, if you go on the 0 column and if I say trending report, it says 14. These are the 14 numbers which are run 0 times. Can I have a view of what are all these 14 reports? A list of the 14 reports which hasn't been run. When you click on this, if you see again, it will get you those 14 reports. Right. Now this is the report I have access to. That's why it is shown in as a hyperlink. But then there are 13 other reports that I don't have access to or the user that I'm currently logged in. But then still these are those reports. The matrix reports is used only in the rows and columns. We can't use it in any other layout. This is how a matrix grid is presented. Right? What you can do is you can do sublevel grouping. If I go back, if you see within report type, let's say I can do up to 8 levels of row grouping. For example, let me again take an example with a worker. I'm checking how many employees are there in each company. What I'll do is I'll simultaneously also create a worker report. Again, the reason I'm taking that is because it is easier to understand and then we'll have a lot more scenarios. But let's say I want to build a matrix report. This count only works on the row grouping, right? If you want. No, it works on column grouping. The way, if you see, ultimately this is also getting counted, right? Each row and each column it is showing there are 14 trended reports which have been executed 0 times. Let me open this. The summarization type that you define, that is not specific to a row or column. If I may open this report definition once again, if you see we have something called row grouping, then something called column grouping and then fields. To summarize, it is not specific to row and column. Whatever combination of row grouping and column grouping you define, the count will simply get you the count against that combination. In this case, it is getting me the count for this report type executed this time. This report type executed this many time and on and forth. Right? It's not specific to row grouping or column grouping, but the combination that you have defined for row and column grouping. It will get you that summarization value. But if we have chosen count, it would work for both of them. Suppose we choose max or average, those at the expression exactly, that will also work for both of them. Exactly. Can we define just for the row grouping? It should give us a count. Thank you. Now let me, as I mentioned, I'll also create a separate worker report which will allow us to basically allow me to show how I can do a sublevel grouping. For example, I'm building a report for worker and I want to get a count of all workers based on the company those workers belong to. But within that company, I also want to understand the country that these workers belong to. Now I can go in here and define a sublevel grouping and say company and location, address, country. I'll put a filter. Filter prompts, a lot of these values are exactly similar. I can go in here and say company. I'll put a filter too, else it will give me a lot of data. I'll only select some global model services. Let's take from here. Here. Right now, we have defined two levels of row grouping. When I run it, if you see, for this company and within this company, this country, there are 8 employees. Right? Can do. We have within this company Global Modern Services Netherlands. There are 7 employees who belong to the Netherlands. There are 2 employees who belong to Global Modern Services Netherlands, but are located in Luxembourg. Right again. There is 1 employee again in GMS Netherlands belonging to Belgium. I want to group this data properly because right now, the way it is showing me data is based on the count from top to bottom. The highest count shows at the top, and then it shows the count in descending order. It is currently showing me data in terms of row total descending. I want to show it alphabetic ascending. Now, when you are having multi-level groupings, you cannot have different groupings in different sort order, at least when I last checked. If you see, it's giving me an error, and the error says you cannot have different values. Sorted in different manner. If I've selected this as alphabetic ascending, I'll also have to select this as alphabetic ascending. Right. That is a limitation. Now, when I run this report, now if you see, it gives me data which is much more logical. Within GMS Sweden, however, country Denmark, there is 1 employee. I want to get that employee. I can click on it and verify this data. Let's see Leslie Rose. And why is? How is that Workday gives this worker here and this report here? Once again, it is simply getting me. When I click on drill down, it is drilling down the instances that are returned. The data source that is built, that this report is built on, is basically returning worker instance. And that's what is shown in this hyperlink. This data source, it simply returns custom reports. And that's why when I click anywhere, it is getting me those custom reports which form that count. Right. Let's quickly check what's happening with Leslie. If you see, she belongs to GMS Sweden, which is where she gets tagged, and she belongs to Denmark. Her location is Copenhagen, which is, I believe, in Denmark. Right. Workday is automatically grouping me the values based on groupings that I have defined, and I don't have to do anything about it. Let's quickly build an eval expression. Now this looks fine, but then it's showing me a lot of different columns, right? Let's say I want to group, say, any report that is run 0 to 9 times. I want to group it into a column saying 0 to 9. And then from 10 to 19, I want to build another column and on and forth. Right. Instead of showing a column for each number, I want to group them together. What I'll do is I'll go ahead and create a calc field of type eval expression. Now there are 2 types of calc fields. One is eval expression and the second one is eval expression band. Both are exactly similar with a slight difference. What I do is, can you please explain once again why we are creating that calculated form? Currently, this is how the report output looks, right? Instead of this, I need a report output, something of this sort. Here we have report type, right? And we have advanced. We have matrix and on and forth on the column grouping. I don't want a count saying the report runs 0 time, 1 time, 2 time. This is how it currently shows me. Instead of this, I want output something of this sort, saying 0 to 9. And it should show me all reports that were executed 0 to 9 times. Right here. I want then 10 to 19. All reports run from 10 to 19 times should be grouped here. That's how I want my columns to be basically combined. Makes sense. Does it make sense? Perfect. I'll create a calc field. Is on report definition. The reason I'm building out the report definition is because if you see, this field is on the board, definition. And we have evil. Expression. As I mentioned, there are two. One is evil expression and band, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Now basically, how do I group my data? I want to basically write some condition. I was talking about that LRV and I said evil expression. What is evil expression? Evil expression allows you to evaluate a series of conditions. And based on the condition, if it is true, then you can return a certain value. Now there are two ways I can build this calc field. Ultimately, how do I want my reports to be grouped? Let's say here I may come back. I'm creating a band called 0 to 9, right from 0 till 9. Basically, how many transpose reports were run 0 times 12. One transport report has been run 2 times and one has been done 6 times. In 0 to 9 band under transport report, it should show me 14 as the count. Right now, how do I group my data for that? I'll have to basically check how many reports have been run. 0 time, 1 time, 2 time, 3 time, 4 time and on and forth. Right. That's how I'll have to check. For that, I'll have to build a condition. Let me also create another call field to show you side by side the difference between evil expression and evil expression band. Here I'm selecting evaluate expression band. Once again, if you see, this has a similar layout. I can define a condition and based on the condition, I can return a value. But the difference is in evil expression, I can only return a text value. Let me first build my conditions. I'll go in here. I'm creating a calc field. Now this calc field is true and false, right? Because I'll have to, basically any condition is true and false. Report definition. Right. Save to false. Exit 0 to. I'm creating a true false condition saying if the number of times exit. Here I can simply say is less than or equal to. Right. Because that's all I need. Any if a report has been executed from 0 to 9. This is my first condition. Now obviously I can use the same condition in my eval expression. I'll calculate as well. ZU EB 0 to 9. It's not EAB. It is true and false. Right. An eval expression band. I can write a series of conditions. Right. And based on that I can return some value. Similarly, I want to write another condition saying that check any report executed 10 to 19 times. I'll come in here, simply copy this calculate that I have created. Copy this and then simply copy this calculate. Copy the name and rename it to. Now I'll have to say any report which has been executed less than 19 times. But the problem is, if I don't just specify this parameter, it will count everything right. Anything which is counted 0 time, 1 time, 2 time up to 19 times. Here we also have to specify the greater than range. I'm saying number of times executed. Greater than or equal to. Right? This second condition would basically check a report that has been executed more than 10 times, but less than or equal to 19 times. This is my second condition. Now I can copy it and add it to my eval expression. Once again, system would first come in here, see, is this condition true? If this condition is true, then it will return whatever you have specified here. If this condition is not true, then it will come here. The moment it receives a true condition, it doesn't evaluate anything further. Right? If a report has been executed 5 times, it will simply come here, return the corresponding value, whatever you have specified. It will not go through all the others. Right? If this is false, then it will come to third condition. We'll just build one more condition. Similarly, I can come to my eval expression as well, and I can add the same condition. Right? I'll create just one more condition. Coming here, I'll copy the existing cal field. Let's say 29. And here I just have to change this and change this to 20. My third true and false condition is ready. I can come in here and copy. Right? Similarly, I can come to my eval expression cal field. And copy my third condition as well. Right? Now, what is the difference between these two? If you see in eval expression band, I can simply come here and specify a return value. And as I mentioned, it always returns fields of type text. Here I can directly specify 0 to 9. And here I can say 10 to 19. And here I can say 20 to 29. And then anything which is above would be my default value. which is more than 29. Right. My evil expression band allows me to evaluate a series of conditions and return a corresponding value. And now my evil expression band is ready. Now, how is this different from evil expression? If I come here, if you see, nothing is actually highlighted right now. That's because through evil expression, I can not just return text. I can return numeric values. I can basically return anything. In field type, I'll have to specify what I want to return. Right? And I can return anything in here. When I select text, for example, here, if you see, I cannot directly enter 0 to 9 the way I have done here. Here I'll have to create one more calculated field of type text constant. When I go in here, because I'm returning fields of type text, I'm only able to select fields of type text because that's the only thing I can return. And these are the only text fields available on this business object. Instead of text, let's say I want to return a number numeric. When I go in here and select all, it is only showing me a numeric value. If I want to build this exact same call field using evil expression instead of evil expression band, I'll have to come here, say I want to return text. But then the disadvantage is I'll have to create 4 more calculated fields. Here I was directly. I'd able to add 0 to 9, 10 to 19 and on and forth. Here, basically what I'll have to do is I'll have to come here. I'll have to create another calculated field of type text constant. Right? I'll simply create it on global. I'll name it as 0 to 9. And this is where I'll have to specify this value. Copy this. I'll have to specify it here. Similarly, I'll have to create one more call field calling it 9 to 19 of type text constant. But the advantage is if you see, you can return anything. You can return a text, field, date, numeric, anything. Right. My evil expression is ready. Let me come here, edit my custom report, and in column grouping, instead of number of times executed, and let's run this and compare our data. Two. If you see, once again it is giving me exactly the same data. If I come here and do a comparison, a transports report was run 12. 12 reports were run 0 times. 2 reports were run 1 time and 6 report. 1 report was run 6 times. Right? Overall, 14 reports have been run in the range 0 to 9. And 1 report has been run others, which is more than 24. Now, when I come here, if this is 0 to 9 times, 14 reports were run and more than 29 times 1 report has been. The reason it shows others here is because at the maximum in terms of column grouping, we can specify up to 24 columns. I think it's a bit more. Anything apart from that, it simply groups it into others. Because they were more than 24 columns, everything apart from 24, it simply grouped it into others. Now here, when I run this report, this is where it shows the actual data. Right? It is giving me exactly same data, but based on the column grouping that I have defined. In the sorting tab, I see one more option, logical sort order. We have logical sort order as well. In sorting tab, we have row total descending or column total descending, row total ascending or column total ascending. We have something called logical sort order, and then we have something called sequence defined in field columns. For example, let me come to this worker report. I'll come in here and I'm editing my report. I want to group my employees based on, let's say, their age band. I'm selecting age band. Age group. Right. When I go to age group, if you see, there's something called logical sort ordering. And what is logical sort ordering? If you see, if I say alphabetic ascending or descending, it will not sort properly. For example, in this case, when I say, let's run this again. Many cases, if you simply select alphabetic ascending or descending, it doesn't work properly. For example, age band, length of service, we automatically have something called logical sort order. What is logical sort order for age group? It would be 0 to 10 and then 11 to 20 or 21 to 30. That's how the logical sort order Workday automatically sorts the value based on logically what makes sense. Right. That is logical sort order, and it is only available in some Workday delivered field. Let me select logical sort order ascending and run it. Right. If you see, this is logical sort order right 20 and under. This may not be actually ascending order or descending order, but Workday automatically sorts it logically. And as I mentioned, this is only available for Workday delivered fields. Now what about our report? Right. I want what logic do you use? I don't know how. The logic is, if you see, how do you, if you are sorting or grouping employees based on their age group, how do you want them to be grouped? Right. You want, for example, the grouping to happen. If you see, this is logical, isn't it? You have 20 and under as one group, and then the next group is 31 to 40, and then the next group is 41 to 50 and 51 to 60. Probably there's no employee from 21 to 30. This is referred to as a logical sort order. Instead of logical sort order, if I, for example, select let these are. Let's first run this. Then we'll see what the output comes, and then I can show you. Alright, currently it's alphabetic ascending, and if you see, because it's alphabetic ascending, this is how Workday has sorted it. Workday is sorting it saying 0, and then after 0 we have 1. And then after 1 we have 2, and after 2 we have 8, and after 8 we have 9. Let's see if we have the logical sort order. This is not a Workday. If you see, even though this is correct in an alphabetic ascending order, whenever we have text field, this is how Workday checks the sorting for a text field. It first checks the first place, which is 0 here, which is the smallest. That's why it gets sorted at the top, because we have selected alphabetic ascending. And then we have 1, because 1 is less than 8. It puts 1 at the top, and within 1 it then checks the next decimal place or next place and says 0 is less than 1, and then 1 0 comes at the top. Even though logically 8 is smaller than 10 for Workday, it checks. For example, if I'm sorting an employee based on their name, in an ascending order, we have Ali and then we have MMS, let's say. How would you sort it? You would first check the first character. And because for both of them the first character is same, you then check the second character. And you see the second character is for Ali is smaller. And that's why Ali come before AMS. Same logic that Workday also uses for sorting when we select alphabetic ascending. The same thing as business process steps, right? Exact business process step. Now, instead of this, you want this to be sorted logically, right? Because logically it should be 0 and then 8 and then 9 and then 10 and 11, 21, 22. That is what is referred to as a logical sort order. In Workday delivered fields, Workday has already. If you see here, it's not giving me an option to select logical sort order, and that's because this is a calculated field. For many of the Workday delivered fields, Workday has automatically defined, even though it may not be correct, in an alphabetic ascending order or descending order. But when you're grouping employees by their age band, it should be 0 to 10 and then 11 to 20 or whatever age band you have defined. That's what is referred to as a logical sort order, even though in alphabetic order it could be not relevant. Alright, that's what logical sort order means. And in our sequence, I also thought sequence order. We are coming to that. Apart from that, I can also define my own custom sequence. In this case, when I come here, I may want to define my own sequence. I can go in here and I can select sequence defined in field groups, and then I can define my own sequence. I can create a field group, right? And I can call it report types, and then I can select the instances for this. I want, let's say, trending to be at the top. I can come in here and I want advanced to be second. If you see, this is not in any particular order. This is the order that I want this to appear in. Right. I can also define my own sort order if I want. Let me cancel this and show once again. Currently, this is how it shows. That's because it's alphabetic ascending, or I have the option to show it in row total descending or ascending, or any of these 4 options. I don't want any of these options. I want the sequence that I want. I can come in here and then I can create my own sequence. I'll select this option and then select create field group values based on the field. You can now define your own sequence. I want trending here and then let's say I want advanced. I'll just select any random sequence. Right. I want to inbox here and then I want transposed and on and forth. I'll have to select all the options. That's the error I'm getting. Have I selected matrix? Not yet. Inbox not selected, search. I think simple is the last one left. I have not defined the field name. And now, when I run this report, that's how the report output gets sorted. Now, this is how my report output is sorted. This is available in all the metrics report. This create report field values, because sometimes I saw only valid options. No, it's available based on the field type you select. Again, I'm not aware of the logic, for example, for length of service. If you see, it's not giving me that option. It's available for all metrics reports, but it's dependent on the field type. It would be available for only fields of type instance, because that's where you can select. If you see, this is a text field. Workday doesn't know what values will be returned in this text field. But then, because this is an instance field, Workday knows the values of instances that are available for the type. That's what it's doing. Now, apart from this, you have other summarization options as well. For example, you can, for each report type, you can say what is the maximum. Maximum number of times the report was executed, or what is the minimum number of times a given report has been executed. You can also say what is the average number of times. Right. Now you can come in here and search for number of times. You want to get that report which has been executed maximum number of times. And you want to get an average of the number of times that were executed. You can come in here on right. There are, let's take a smaller. If you remember, let's come here. It was 6. That was the maximum number of times that the report has been executed for. Transport. What is the maximum number of times a report has been executed? It is. If you see for transposed, it is showing 6 as the maximum number of times a report has been executed. For trending, if I come in here, if you see, the maximum number of times is 5. One report has been executed 5 times and within this range. And it is showing 5 here. Right. And I can click here to get. Right. This particular report has been executed 6 times. Compared talent by organization. If I want to check that, if I come here and click here. If you see, this report has been executed 6 times. Right. I can get the memo which report has been executed maximum number of times and what is the maximum number of times the report has been executed, minimum number of times, and what is the average number of times a given report has been executed. Right. And if you see, it is showing these summarizations once again. I don't have an option to say only show the summarization for row grouping. For each of the row and column groupings that have been defined, it is giving me transposed report in the range 0 to 9, count is 14, my maximum is 6, minimum is 0, average is 1. Similarly, transposed report in the range, this column grouping is these values. These summarizations are always shown for a combination of row and the column grouping. Now I also have the option to control what shows on this hyperlink. Currently, whenever I click on that hyperlink, it only shows me the report name. And now it is also showing me those other summarizations that I have added. Right? But then if you see, it actually doesn't make sense. This report. If you see, this makes sense. It was executed 6 times, but then it is showing me the same value for maximum and average, which is actually doesn't make sense. This report was executed 2 times, which is what? But then it shows the same value for maximum, minimum and average. This drill down value, it simply shows the default of the summarizations that you entered along with the instance against which it is showing that data. Obviously, it doesn't make sense. At least it made sense earlier when we were just checking the number of times a given report was executed. But now this is not logical. I have the option to go ahead and change this drill down data. I can come in here and define the values that I want to show on my drill down. I can come to the drill down tab and come in here and specify the details of my drill down. Now I want the report name. If you see, this is similar to how I built my advanced report. Under drill down tab within detailed data, I can specify any detailed data. I am selecting the report type. I'm selecting the number of times that report was executed. And I can add any other value. For example, I am selecting the report owner. Right? And any other value from this business object. I can come in here and it will show me all of those options. I want to see. Created on and forth. Now, when I run this report, now if I click somewhere, this data makes much more sense. Which are those 20 reports that were run 0 to 9 times? When I click here, for example, it shows me these are those 20 reports. They're all of type inbox. Obviously, we are looking at inbox and it shows me how many times each report has been executed. Right. Now when I see here, and let's sort it in descending order, the number of times the report. If you see, the maximum number of time any report has been executed is 2. And that's what it shows. The maximum number of times executed is 2. The minimum number of times, obviously, number of reports have been executed 0 times. And it also shows me the report owner and when that report was created. Now this data is much more logical. I can click on any of these numbers. 451 matrix reports and it shows me those 451 matrix reports. In addition to this, if you see this, something called view by option. And when I click here, I have a number of view by options listed. I'll get the same option. If you see, if there's something called a down arrow, and it shows me the same view by options. Right? I can either click on that number and then go to view by options, or I have the downward arrow directly shows me those. View by options, chart type. Now I can come in here. For example, I want to see these reports based on, let's say, the report owner. I'm selecting report owner and refresh. These 27 reports or these 451 reports overall. If I scroll down, overall there are 451 reports. They are now grouped based on the report owner. There are 2 reports which are owned by Arushi, and there are 3 reports owned by Aditi, and there are 297 reports owned by Logan McNeil, and on and forth. Right. I want to see which are these 297 reports owned by Logan McNeil. I can again click here. It once again shows me the same details of the detailed data that I've added. I want to see these 297 reports which are owned by Logan McNeil based on, let's say, their data source. Now again I can select by, and now it shows me the data source. Out of those 297 reports, which is the overall count if I keep scrolling down, it is still showing me data for those 297 reports, but grouped by the data source, which are these 85 reports which are based on all active and terminated workers. If you see, I can keep drilling down. Right now I also. Where are these view by options coming from? They are coming by default from the business object that we have selected. If I want, I can also restrict those view by options. All view by options come by default based on the data source you have selected. For example, in this report, workers count. If I go in here and look at this custom report that I've created, it shows me a whole list of other view by options which are coming from this business object called worker. When I come in here, these are all view by options. I can view employees based on their company, cost center, age group, executive group, and on. All view by options come by default based on the business object that has been selected for the report. But if you want, we can restrict them. I can come to drill down. Right? Currently, we are using the default fields for view by option. What I can do is I can restrict it and select only some specific fields. I want to view based on, let's say, the data source and the report owner. Now, when I go in here, if you see under view by, it only shows me those 2 options. Now, if you see when I click on a number here, for example, there are 20 reports, inbox reports, which were executed 0 to 9 times. And when I click here, it shows me those 20 reports, which is fine. Right. But then let me click here. I want to know which are those 2 reports or a given report has been. What is the maximum number of time a report has been executed? Inbox, it is 2 times. Right. But then when I click here, it still shows me those 20 reports, right? That is showing me these 20 reports which are part of this row grouping and this particular column grouping. Ideally, I would have wanted to see that report that was executed the maximum number of times, which is 2. Ideally, I would have wanted to see this report and any other report that was executed 2 times. But the problem is, if I click anywhere in this column, this row combination, it shows me these instances. Similarly, when I click here, I only want to see that report, that inbox report, which was executed the minimum number of time, which is in this case 0 when I click here. Ideally, what I would want to see is that one report or XYZ reports that were executed 0 times. But the problem is it shows me 20. Now the same problem arises. For example, I want to see if you see there are 19 reports or 13 reports. 13 box report, which were executed 10 to 19 times, and it shows me those numbers. But then I want to see which report was executed, maximum number of times 19. It still shows me those 13 reports. Now, how do I avoid this? Right? Obviously, this doesn't make any sense. I'll have to come in here and again filter my data. In this case, I only want to see those reports which are part of this count. For that, I can also do detailed data override. I edit my custom report. Right? What is happening? It is simply showing. Whenever I click anywhere in here, it is showing me that instance or those instances which are for the combination of a specific report type and the number of times. For that, I can create something called detailed data override. I can come in here and click detailed data override. Right now, this is similar to how we created drill down, right? If you see, we have the option called columns. I can come in here and similar to how I did earlier, I can enter my report name. Let me open the report side by side that it makes sense to you. Earlier under drill down. Overall, I had come in here under detailed data. I had added these values, these fields, right? And these are what show whenever I click on any number. Now what I'm doing is I'm creating this detailed data override for the column, which is maximum number of times for this summarization. And I'm just adding the report name and I'm adding. In this override, let's say I'm adding the number of times this was executed. Right. But also importantly here, I don't want to see all instances. Right. I only want to see those instances where the field to summarize is not equal to 0. Right. What is the field that I'm summarizing? I'm basically summarizing this field. Right. Now, this would not give me the right output, but let's run this report and see the difference. Here I have created a detailed data override for maximum column. I have not created it for minimum and average. Let's see the difference. I run this report. And do one. It still gives me the same output. Right? Exactly same. The difference is now, for example, when I click here, it shows me the drill down field that I've added. Report name, report type, times executed. The report owner created on these 21. But when I click on maximum, there is one report that has been executed 4 times. Let's see which is that report. If I sort it in descending order, if you see, this report was executed the maximum number of times, which is 4. When I click here this time. If you see now, it is not showing me those 21 reports. Instead, what it is showing, let me sort it in ascending order. It is only showing me those reports where the fields to summarizer. What are we summarizing? We are summarizing the report based on the times they were executed. And I'm then getting that report which was executed maximum number of times. Because we selected that option only show those fields where fields to summarize is greater than 0, not equal to 0. It is only showing me that reports wherein the number of times executed was greater than 0 or not 0. Right. In many cases, this is what you want. But this is why I mentioned in our case, this is not the right output. It still doesn't give me the relevant data. Ideally now, if do you see the difference? Here I had created a detailed data override when I had just selected 2 columns. For maximum, I had selected report name and number of times executed. But then when I click on minimum, their system since shows the default drill down value. When I click on this column, because here I have not created any detailed data, here it still shows me the same output that is shown on the first column. Similarly, if I click on average, again it shows me the exact same data because here it is showing me the default drill down data. But for maximum, I had selected 2 columns, which is what it shows me. But then I had also selected the option saying only show me those reports. Let's show this here. For maximum, I had created a detailed data override, but in the option that I had selected was report name and times executed. With the option only show me those fields where the instances that are being summarized are not equal to 0. Now ideally, what do I want? Let's go ahead and edit this detailed data override. If I want to edit a detailed data override, I'll come in here. Detailed data override and edit. This is what I want. How do I get the output here? There's no way. I can only get that report. And instances where the condition is true. Ideally, here I want only that report which was executed the maximum number of times, which is basically this one. Can you create a true and false condition here, like report name equal to this? But see, this is dynamic, right? I can create true, false condition saying that get me report, which report name is this. But then tomorrow this report may get executed 10 times. I want system to dynamically get me that report which was executed the maximum number of times. Now, in this scenario, this is not possible, right? Can I get only that report that was executed maximum number of times? I don't think I can get that report. But many cases, you can actually build a condition to get that output whatever you want. I don't think in this case, we can only selectively get that report which was executed the maximum number of times. I don't think we can get that. And this is only available in the maximum. No, this is available in all. I'm just showing maximum as an example. You can go to any of those options. You can count, you can put a detailed data or write anywhere. Right. There are other drilling options as well. You can completely disable drilling. Right. You don't want drilling to happen at all. You can go in here and say disable drilling, all drilling for this field. When I run this report, I cannot do it on a detailed data. If I come to the overall report, then I can disable all drilling for the report. Let me go back to my report. Here as well for your question. I can come in here and define detailed data override. I can go to create and then define detailed data override. On the overall report, I can come to drill down and then I can disable all drilling for the report. I don't want any drilling to happen. When I do that, everything will be this grayed out. I cannot click on any of these numbers to then drill down. Or I can also say disable drill to details for the report. When I do that, I'll not be able to click on this value currently. If you see the difference when I click here, it shows me that those instances, and then I have the view by option. Right? Let's see what happens when I say disable drill to details for the report. This will drill. I'll come in here. Now, when I run this report, not disabled entire drilling. Instead, what I've done is now, when I click on this number, if you see, it doesn't give me this value. Instead, it is directly drilling based on the first UI option, which is data source. Right? When I select that option, disable drill to one option is disable entire drilling. And the second option is wherein I can say, I don't want anyone to see these individual instances. I only want them to see the summarized data. You see, it is the moment I click anywhere. It is directly opening it based on the first view by option which you may want to see. For example, for sensitive data, you are basically probably showing the maximum minimum salaries for the employee. Right. And you don't want anyone to see a given worker and see what their salaries. Instead, you only want to see the summarized numbers. Right. This is where you cannot see the individual report. You can only see the report. Based on these summarization values I have defined. Right. That is disabled. Drilling to details for the report. I have the option disable drilling to details for the report. Again, within this, if I want, I can define an order in which I want to sort my columns. I want to sort based on the number of times they were executed. I can come in here and drilling. I want to sort my output based on the number of times they were executed, and I click on Detailed Data. And I want to sort them in, let's say, descending order. Now it automatically gets sorted. For example, let's click here. Those 14 reports are sorted based on the number of times they were executed. Right. Now, the advantage of a matrix report is I can simply, instead of just showing charts and instead of simply showing these tables, I can also show chart. If I come to output, currently I'm only showing table. I can come in here and I can see this data both as a chart as well as a table. Right. It is showing me for each report type. This is the overall count. For report, this is the advanced reports, and on the row grouping on the horizontal axis, it is showing me the report type. And on the vertical axis, it is basically showing me the count of those reports, 2374. Advanced report. I'm not sure what it is showing on the vertical axis, but any which ways, we have the option to change it. Before I do that, I can also come in here and select the different chart type. I want to see a donut chart. I can come in here and I can get a donut. I can select any of the other chart types. The default chart type, if nothing has been specified, is column clustered. And then below, it also shows me numbers. Any which ways I want to display this chart type in a logical manner. We can come in here. Under Out, I have these chart options. You see the default chart is column clustered on horizontal axis. It is showing me my row grouping. What is my excuse me? What is my row grouping? My row grouping is the report type. This is my row grouping. It is a report type. On the horizontal axis, it is showing me my row grouping. I can say I don't want row grouping to be shown. I want the column grouping to be shown. I can select, instead of row grouping, my column grouping, which is basically the number of times they were executed. Right? Any which ways, let's go back on the legend. I want to see metrics. What is legend? Basically those bars that were showing. And it is showing me all 4 metrics. Matrix, one which is overall count for each row grouping. For each report type, it is showing the maximum number of times the report was run, the minimum number of times the report was run, and the average. Right. In this case, maybe this is not relevant for me. I only want to see the overall count. I can decide which metrics I want to include. Alright, let's first run this and then we'll see what other options are available. Right. Now for each report type, it's only showing me the overall count. And this is what it was showing. It was showing the overall count, which is 2, 3, 7, 4 and 23. Advanced reports we have 2, 3, 7, 4. Composite reports we have 23 and on and forth. It is only showing me the first matrix. And what is that first matrix? This is my first matrix. Overall, we had 4 metrics, right? Matrix 1, matrix 2, matrix 3, and I have removed these 3 metrics. I also, let's say, edit my report. I want to probably, let's see if I have that option available under chart options. I want to add a secondary access. On the secondary access, I want to include. I want to show the maximum number of times the report was executed. And here I am selecting a line type. Let's run this and we'll see. I'll open the side by side that we can compare it against the report definition. What is it showing on the primary axis? If I come in here, my column clustered, this got changed. Now let's compare it with what I have done. It's basically showing me a combo chart. What I've done is I have said I want to show a column clustered graph wherein the horizontal axis is row grouping. That's what it shows me as the horizontal axis. Different types of report, right? I want to show the matrix 1. What is my matrix 1? We count out that report. There are 2, 3, 7, 4 advanced report, 23 composite report and on and forth. But then I have also said show me a secondary access, right? wherein I want to show the maximum number of times a report was run because that's my metrics. 2. And I want to see that as a line. What is the maximum number of times my advanced report was run? It was, I think, 29 or something. For each report type, it shows me the maximum number of times. It's, I think, 359 or something. Given report was run. And it also shows me what is the maximum. If you see, 21 is the maximum number of times the composite report was run. That is what it shows me, which is what if I see here, if you see in composite report, what is the maximum number of times any report was run? It was 21. Right? On the vertical axis or on the secondary axis, I'm also showing a count in the form of a line graph. The second axis, which is the number of times a report was run. And if I want, I can give it a label. I have all those options available. Any question? And instead of column clustered, if I want, I can select a different chart type altogether. I don't want a column clustered. I want a different chart. I can come in here and select a different chart type. Metrics means the count max minimum. Only those things. Exactly right. We have some as well. Let's see. I want a sum. We have max minimum sum, and then we can also create our own custom calculation. I am in this other report. I'm looking workers based on, let's say, their company. I have the option called sum. And I want to, let's say, sum the total salary of all the workers. When I go to all, it would only show me numeric fields and currency fields. When I go to all, because only numeric and currency fields can be summed. I want a sum of the total allowances for all workers in a given company. I can come in here and do a sum. A matrix is simply a report which allows you to summarize data. Right? That's all of the matrices. Please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.